Hey everyone, and welcome to the first of 3 videos intended to help you with layout in CSS. This video is going to cover the box model. And I covered the box model very briefly in the very first CSS video, but we're going to cover it in a lot more depth here, including how to alter the different properties of every box. So overall, the box model says that every element in HTML, inline and block, has an invisible box around it. This box can be altered and adjusted in a number of different ways. The 3 main things that you can adjust are padding, which is the space inside the box, margin, which is the space outside the box, and border, which is the line around the box. So let's take the example of this H1. I'm going to give this a border 5-pixel solid black so that you can see the box. That helped a lot to kind of understand this. If I adjust the padding of that box with, say, 50 pixels of padding, you'll see that that adds space to the inside of the box. If, however, I instead add 50 pixels of margin, you'll see that that increases the space outside the box. If I have both, it will increase the space inside and outside the box. And so those are the 3 things that you can target. Margin and padding syntax are basically identical to each other. And the way that this works is that you can adjust the margin for the top of the box, the right side, the bottom side, and the left side. You can also do these with top and bottom together and left and right together, or all 4 together as a whole. So let's start with this right here, which is a single value for your margin and for the padding. I'm actually going to do this on padding because it's, I think, a little easier to see inside the box. So a single value is going to adjust all 4 sides at once. If I do 2 values, it's going to do the top and bottom together with the first value, 50 pixels, and it's going to do the left and right sides with the second value, 20 pixels. To adjust all 4 sides of the box, you need to set 4 different values for your values here. So the way this works is it starts up at the top and goes clockwise to right, bottom, and left. So think of it as starting at noon and then going clockwise from there. So I could set 20 pixels on the top, 30 pixels on the right, 40 pixels on the bottom, and 10 pixels on the left side. If you want to specify a single side of padding or margin, but not change the other sides, you can do that via margin hyphen and then top right, bottom, or left, or padding top, right, bottom, or left. So if you set padding top of 10 pixels, that will adjust the top padding, but no other padding within the box. In the typography video, I covered how to specify different sizes of type, and the same kinds of things apply here. You can set pixel values, percentage values, and EM values within padding and margin. If you want to center a box, this is going to be done with what's referred to as auto margins, and that's going to apply to left and right. Auto margins of left and right is going to say automatically adjust the margins based on the size of this element, centering it. Centering can only be done if you have a width, though, so I'm going to add in a width of 80%, and you'll see that my content will put a 10% margin over here and 10% margin over here. There's a few other things you need to know with margins. First of all, margins can accept negative values, which will put the box further beyond the normal place that the box would go. So if I do negative 50 pixels margin, you see that my box disappears entirely off the page. Let's actually do a negative 10 pixels so you can see it a little bit better, pulling it right up to the corner of the page. Next, you should know that margins will collapse together. And the way this works is that when you have two different margins that overlap, that is, they occupy the same space, they will collapse together into the largest value for the margins in that space. So let's take this document and look right here. There's space between the header box right here and the ordered list box. And I'm going to add a border around the ordered list box so that you can see that. So there's this space right in here. And if I set a margin on the top of the ordered list box, and I set a margin on the bottom of the header up there, these two margins, the bottom of this and the top of this, occupy the same space. Therefore, it defaults to the highest value within that. So if I increase this margin top up to 50 pixels, instead of adding 40 and 50 together to be at 90, it's going to collapse to 50 here because that's the highest value. If I bump this one up to 60, it's going to collapse to 60 because that's the highest value. It doesn't matter which one is highest, and even if there's 3 or 4 margins overlapping together, it will collapse down to the highest value. The other margin behavior you need to know is how margins and padding work with inline elements. So I'm actually going to set a span on the word model right here. And then I'm going to set a background color on that so that you can see it. Okay, so you can see that right there. Span, as you learned in the HTML videos, is an inline element, meaning that it is within a block element and does not create its own line. Because it's an inline element, margins and padding work a little bit differently here. So I'm going to set a little padding on it. And you'll see that the padding works on all sides of that box. If, however, I set a margin on it, you'll see that it only adds margin to the left and the right of that element. That's why it gets bumped over, but not to the top and bottom. And that's because a margin applied to the top and bottom of any element that is inline would break the normal flow top to bottom of the document. And therefore, top and bottom margins on inline elements do not work at all. Now that I've covered margin and padding syntax, it's time to cover borders. So borders have 3 properties associated with them, and those are contained in an overall shorthand property of border. And you can choose to use either the 3 separate properties or the shorthand property. Most CSS developers will use the shorthand border property, but you can also use border width, border style, and border color. And they appear in the shorthand property in that order. And traditionally, border width is set entirely with pixels. You will basically never use any other value for this. So border width of 5 pixels. Style, which there's a ton of different styles available to you. Solid is just a normal, perfectly solid line, but there's also dotted and dashed and other options as well. And color here. So you see that these 3 together are the same thing as this right here. As with bullets, you can also specify a border image, so you can do a custom image border. However, unlike with bullets, this is a lot more complicated because an image for a border is going to have to stretch across, down, and then back across again. And in that case, it needs to be sliced and sized really appropriately. And so there's a lot more going on with border image. You can Google border image tutorials, but I'm not going to cover that in this video because of its complexity. You can adjust the size of any given box with two different properties, width and height. And much like other sizing elements, these can accept pixel values, percentages, and EMs. And generally, you're going to set width and only width and not height. There are some contexts in which you want to set height, but usually width is the primary thing because height will just depend on the content you have within the box. I'm going to wrap up by showing you a couple of nifty little tricks. The first is what's referred to as border radius, which will do rounded corners on a box. So you can adjust the value for this in percentages or pixels. And I'm going to start by doing a 5 pixel, and you'll see this box gets very slightly rounded corners. A 20 pixel would do much more significantly rounded corners. There is a nice little hack too. If you have a box that you want to become circular, you can do a border radius of 50% and or 100%. And that will become circular. In this case, it becomes an oval because there's not enough space for it to become circular. But if you have a small enough box and you don't have much content in it, you can turn it into a circle via border radius. The other trick here is adding a drop shadow, and this is done via box shadow. And I'm going to first give this box a background color so that you can see it. And I'm going to remove the border so you can see this box shadow a little bit better. And box shadow is going to accept several values. The first value is going to be the X offset. So if I do 2 pixels, it's going to move from the 2 pixels from the box to the right. And then I'm going to set another value. This is a Y offset. So you see now we have a 2 pixel offset this direction, 2 pixel offset this direction. We can also set a blur on this, so I can even put it down to like 5 pixels to make it a little hazier. And you can set a color. This is one place that RGB alpha, which I covered in the color video, is really useful because you can set kind of like a softer gray that creates this nice diffuse box shadow, and you can have this really attractive box shadow like this. You can also set this with hex codes or regular RGB integers. So that covers everything you can do with individual boxes. The next video is going to cover how to move boxes around on the page to achieve the layout that you're looking for. Thanks for watching.